Genesis 39, 1-23. Devotional focus verse. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Genesis 39:20. For as long as I can remember, my aunt, who is now in her 90s, has done needlework. Embroidery and counted cross-stitch were two of her favorite activities until failing eyesight made such projects impossible. In fact, I have a bookmark that was one of her last embroidery projects. It is a quote from Psalm 119, embellished with flowers, but you would never know that by looking at the underside of the project. On the back of my bookmark, the threads cross over each other with seemingly no order or purpose. That is true of many types of hand-created needlework. Often the most beautiful work has the most knots and crossed threads on the underside. Sometimes life is like a piece of needlework. While God is creating a beautiful picture, we see only the underside, the crossed threads, knots, and apparently random bits of color and pattern. God has a special plan that He is working out from His divine perspective, but very possibly it makes no sense to us. At the time of the focus verse, Joseph could have felt that way. He had faced many perplexing obstacles during the preceding years, and he might have been tempted to think God had forgotten him. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused by the wife of a man he had served faithfully, and being put in prison, none of these events seemed to be comprehensible from a human standpoint. But in all of these circumstances, God was there, keeping watch over Joseph. He was allowing and orchestrating the events that were to prepare his young servant to fulfill God's own plan. What may have appeared to be knots and crossed threads to Joseph were, in reality, God's training for Joseph to assume a position of honor and usefulness. God has promised that if we serve Him, all the events in our lives will work out for good. During a trial, we may not be able to see anything beneficial at all, but those times are when we exercise faith. As we look at examples such as Joseph, we can be encouraged that God is in control and that He has a definite purpose for us. As we trust that life's circumstances are working out God's special plan, we can be assured it will all be for His glory if we remain faithful. Background information. Today's text begins the account of Joseph in Egypt. This chapter tells how he was sold to Potiphar, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and put into prison. Joseph was purchased by Potiphar, who was captain of the guard. See verse 1. Potiphar was a military chief, or possibly the leader in charge of executions. He was an Egyptian aristocrat who had a high position in that society and favor in Pharaoh's court. Potiphar observed Joseph's conduct and character and promoted him. God's blessing was on Potiphar's household because of Joseph. Rich families in Egypt during this era enjoyed many luxuries. Often their homes had 2 or 3 stories, expensive furnishings, balconies, and lovely gardens. They ate delicacies from dishes of gold. Frequently, the first floor was for the servants, and the wealthy family used the upper portion of the house. The affluent women of Egypt had a great deal of freedom and were often loose morally. The actions of Potiphar's wife may not have been unusual for a woman of her social status. Joseph's resistance was based on 2 convictions, which he verbalized to the woman. He was grateful and loyal to his master, who had treated him well, and, more importantly, what she asked would be a sin against God. Angry at being thwarted, Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph, and Potiphar put him in prison. The wealthy often had prisons in or near their palaces. However, Joseph was incarcerated where government prisoners were held. Since the crimes of these men were state offenses, it is thought that extra security and punishment may have been inflicted. Joseph had his feet put in fetters. See Psalm 105:18. However, God's blessing was upon Joseph in the prison. God caused the keeper of the prison to respect him and put him in a position of authority. Like Potiphar, the warden turned everything over to Joseph, and he was put in charge of all the other prisoners. Conclusion. Are you in the middle of an incomprehensible circumstance? Remember that God has a plan in mind. If you trust in Him, He will work out every aspect of your life for His glory.
Genesis chapter 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house, and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. And it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness, and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time, that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me, and he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us, he came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her, until his lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant, which thou hast brought unto us, came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him, and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper.